Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rocket Lasso Live. It is another Wednesday, and we've got some extra bonus episodes that we had not originally been planning. Or I suppose I had been planning, but I couldn't talk about what it was. I couldn't talk about Recall coming out, and I couldn't talk about the fact that R23 was coming out quickly. But here we are back, and I have a special guest. Rick Barrett has returned.
Hey,
Hello.
everybody.
Thanks for making it, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I gave you a little bit more notice this time. Like 4 days ago, I asked this time instead of the day of. So Rick is always a good sport and comes and hangs out. And now we've got all the inside information. And Rick is also super on the inside at Maxon as far as being involved in the development and seeing where things are going and helping guide where things are going, right? That's
yeah,
more
you
where
can
you're
blame me.
So you give Rick a bunch of credit for the things that you like and yell at Rick for the things you don't like.
Yep.
So he's our main line straight to Maxon. So this is exciting. We don't have a specific plan right now of what we're doing. We're just going to talk about R23. We're going to spend a lot of time just answering questions from everybody here. I think we can go right into just starting to talk about it. So no little intro and then re-intro again. We'll just start going. But let's see who we've got hanging out so far. We've already got people showing up on YouTube and on Twitch. So we've got Pierre, Chame, Real Pixel, let's see, Apoxia, Tobias, Coolio, Eric, Michelangelo, Guillermo, Jaspal, I'm so bad at pronunciation. Fritz Lang, Sam. We got lots of people coming to hang out. There's more and more names coming quickly. So what is here? And Tobias, Monthys, Dean. Rick is also going to be checking out the chat as well. Oh, Bernd is here from Maxon, so we've got more people hanging out, so we'll see how this goes. So Rick has a bunch of scene files and demos that I've got all the ones that I had spent the weekend learning and building how the different tools worked. So start getting your questions together. This is entirely going to be built around R23. So, Cinema 4D questions, what's currently out in the new features. We can talk in more detail about pretty much anything along those lines. So no random links this time, everybody. Maybe we'll do another live stream soon for that type of thing, but we'll see how that goes. I guess Tobias is asking what you think of Recall, and I'm not
think
actually
it's
don't
awesome.
know.
Yeah, I think it's an awesome plugin. I haven't had a chance because you were busy with Recall. I was busy with the release 23, so I haven't had a huge chance to play with it, but I've watched your videos, and it looks like a great workflow tool.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's something we snuck in ahead of time. We're actually working on some other tools, and we're trying to figure out exactly how to present some of the other stuff we're working on. But when I found out what the release date was for this, I was like, okay, I want to get out a little bit ahead of that. So man, it turned into a crazy 3 weeks of getting that launched and ready and prepped. But it's I'm super excited about that. For anybody who doesn't know, Rocket Lasso just released its very first plugin, and it's a workflow tool, and I think it's really powerful. It's a way of really quickly saving your objects and being able to bring them back, but it does a lot more things. It is not just it's not just hiding your objects away. It is a big full workflow tool. We'll talk about that a little bit more at a different time, because today we're here to talk about R23, and we got some questions starting to come in already. Real Pixel was asking, will these features come simultaneously to S22, and will it be renamed to S23?
Yeah, so, well, let's back up just a little bit. So, first of all, Release 23 announced yesterday, shipping today. Subscribers can just go download it. Go straight to maxon.net/try and download the trial, or you can go to support downloads and download the latest installer. It's the same installer. Because the trial can just be activated now, and you just log in with your My Maxon account. So if you're a subscriber, you're good to go. There was a question about upgrades, and for perpetual users, there are upgrades available. Contact sales about that. There is an upgrade price from R2021 and then from older versions. And there's also some discounts on your first year of subscription if you are just coming out of an MSA, or if you have an older version of Cinema 4D. So definitely contact sales for more information on those things.
I guess a question for myself was, it was a pretty big surprise to everybody a few months ago when there was suddenly an S22, and it's sort of at the half-year point. It's been a really, really long time since Maxon wasn't on a pretty regular August, September, once a year kind of cadence.
Yeah, and that's part of coming along with subscription. It's one of the benefits to users of subscription is that they get updates more frequently. We have the sort of the ability and also sort of the necessity of bringing things out on a more regular basis for subscribers, and so it's giving us the opportunity to very much change the way that we develop the software. Putting things out in a more iterative fashion. As you saw with 2223, we put out a big batch of UV tools in 22, and then we were able to do some refinements and add some additional things on the UV side with 23, while also moving on to some of the next topics like animation.
Yeah, I was really surprised that all of the new animation tools are kind of sprinkled throughout, but two of the big features being the motion transfer and the new pose the new pose library, the pose manager, those are both very much focused on animation and even character animation specifically. So that was a surprise, in addition to like dozens of little tweaks in the timeline just to speed things up and help the user out.
Yeah, and the workflow stuff was really important to me, especially as we were planning out the release. I wanted to make sure that we could get a lot of those quality of life enhancements in for folks because, we definitely wanted tools that were specific for character animation, but we also wanted to improve the everyday life of animating, of everybody who's animating in Cinema 4D.
This is the silliest thing, but I almost feel like the single best quality of life feature is that when you increase the length of your timeline, the bar jumps to match that length. So it's not like a 4-click process anymore; it's a 1-click process.
When we're developing features, I kind of, product managers, we tend to keep certain users in mind when we're planning out features. And, certainly the increase of the time slider was the Chris Schmidt feature. It was so many times I've watched you on streams increase the time and then have to slide the slider. And I was like, So that was a key feature just for you, Chris.
I had no idea, but you can see I was actually very pleased with it. So wow, I just found that out. So that's cool. Dean is mentioning the copy and paste easing in keyframes, which is another great addition. I was actually, I think the bouncing ball example is sort of an obvious go-to, but I wanted to try and force it in a more difficult situation. So I did the classic 2 keyframe camera move, and I really changed the arc on one of them to like really ramp into it, and then transferred it to the other ones. And it if you change one keyframe, everything's going to like offset horribly, but it transferred to the other ones, and it just did the ease in, ease out over the position and rotation. It's like, wow, okay, this is actually really powerful and important here.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite new little features.
We will, as soon as there starts being questions along it, we will jump into R23 here. But as long as we can just be answering questions up on screen, we'll keep doing that. Let's jump to YouTube because the questions are coming in there as well. Quick question is offline help still available in R23?
Yeah, if you go to maxon.net/support downloads, it should be up there. I actually haven't checked, but it should be there and should be available.
Some people are saying that it looks like you're using Magic Bullet looks just on your camera here. Somebody asked if Magic Bullet is 32-bit linear now. I don't even know what that question means, but
so it's getting a 32-bit linear image from the renderer. I believe with the viewport, it's getting a 16-bit linear image because the viewport actually only works in 16-bit for speed reasons, but you're definitely getting that high dynamic range into Magic Bullet looks, and it's able to work on those.
Do you know if R23 broke plugins again?
Yes, R23 broke actually all plugins pretty much because the C++ API changed, and also Python, we've moved to Python 3. So we are keeping in mind that with 2 updates a year, it makes it that much tougher to keep plugins compatible. But at the same time, Cinema 4D is going through a huge transition, and so there's going to be API changes. With S22, we were able to keep the API consistent so that plugin vendors didn't have to update their plugins. But R23, they are going to need to recompile. And in the case of C++, I think it's mostly a recompile with a little bit of tweaks. In the case of Python plugins, you do have to adapt from Python 2 to 3. I personally, as someone who's created plugins for Cinema 4D, was a little worried about that. But I'll tell you that I've updated most of the Cineversity plugins now, and none of them took me more than 3 or 4 hours. And most of them, several of them, it was just a matter of like a couple minutes to run a script that automatically takes all of it's a script that comes with Python that automatically takes all of the print commands and puts parentheses around them. There's just a few key things like print and range that are different from 2 to 3.
Well, typically that's the case when any SDK changes. Very, very infrequently does anything big happen. It's more like, okay, this one function is now called something different and there's a different comma. It's like, okay,
yeah,
find and replace and then manually check them. And it's like, okay, recompile, and recompiling's a pain, but it's not that bad. I actually didn't know if it broke everything this time because this is the first time ever that me and my brothers were not in charge of updating all the GSG plugins. We only had to update our own plugin. And because it was so close to launch, we just made sure that it was already working as we launched. So,
yeah.
So recall, it might be the only plugin out there right now that's already working with R23. So go and check that.
Well, Toolbox, we just pushed the Toolbox update a couple hours ago. So Toolbox is working with 23. And we also have Swim, OM tools are up. There's a couple of plugins that are up. ArtSmart is in final testing. We found a couple bugs over the weekend, so I just fixed those, and we're testing those. So we'll get all those Cineversity plugins up really soon, and Redshift's up now.
Excellent. So yeah, Redshift's updated. Somebody in the chat is saying that XP and Cycles, so everything from Insidium already seems to be ready and compatible out of the gate. So yeah, it looks like people are on top of it. And all the plugin developers know when something's going to be breaking, so they can fix an update before launch day, typically. You never know.
Especially the larger developers. We have, a great developer support team that's in charge of keeping in communication with all those developers, and so we do everything we can to try and help them along.
Hey, Jonathan Windbrush is hanging out. Welcome.
Awesome. Hey,
Thanks
Jonathan.
for coming hanging out.
Somebody was asking about can subscribers install both 22 and 23? And yes, you can have 21, 22, 23 all installed on your computer. You can switch seamlessly between all three of them. So yes, totally.
Let's see. Well, I think people can keep up putting questions, but I think we should pop open R23 and start tinkering.
Yeah, let's get
around.
Into it.
I think actually, do you want to start out with something, Rick? Because I think, well, if everybody has watched my R23 video, it's an hour and a half of just talking about new features. And I would actually like to see what type of stuff you have. And I mean, Maxon themselves, I mean, you put all the videos out, but as far as like a long demo, I haven't seen much, so we can check out what you've got. There's also, I should mention that there's a lot of new stuff in the content browser, including a lot of really great examples of new features. And while I do have some early access to some of the versions of Cinema, I don't have really much of the way of documentation. So me opening up the content browser and reverse engineering things was one of the best ways I could learn how to do the new features. But I'm going to go ahead and shift over to your screen, Rick, if you've got something pop open. Hopefully this works. It did. Excellent. All right. And everybody keep the questions going and we can kind of steer them around. What do you got first?
Yeah, and you guys are seeing already here that Magic Bullet looks. We've just got a bunch of discs that I cloned here in the background, and they're overbright. They are, material editor came up over here. They're 500% brightness, and we've just pushed them through Magic Bullet looks, and quite a dramatic change. You can also see the new screen space reflections here.
I love that. It's so great.
Yeah. These were something that were introduced in release 19, but with the last big, huge viewport push. But we were able to significantly improve them. They're much more accurate now. They're much faster now. And they don't kind of get confused by the screen elements like they had been happening. Like you'd get your grid all messed up with them. Really great screen space reflections in here and the Magic Bullet looks. But what I wanted to show is some of the animation quality of life stuff. So like Chris was mentioning, this project currently ends on frame 30. We want to add some frames. No need to change the preview range. If your preview range goes to the end of the animation already, it'll just automatically extend to the end. Auto keying, we've made some enhancements so that now it doesn't auto key just anything, because we got a lot of feedback from users that they never used it because they just ended up with keyframes all over the place that they didn't want. So now it works a lot like After Effects. So you go in and you just put a couple of keyframes on the things that you care about, and then you can go in and actually just move them. And you can see that keyframes will be made all along the way. And I have a little expression there that's rolling the ball.
Yeah, so only things that already previously were keyframed will now be keyframed as you continue moving forward. So you can, if you're working on a character, you could grab all the character controls, say record everything at the time of 0. But now as you move forward, you're not actually accidentally going to keyframe your camera. You're not going to create a cube and the keyframes on the cube are appearing. It's like, no, just the character, and that is all that's getting applied.
Totally. Yeah, so, we've got the auto keying works really nice now. Of course, that animation looks really bad because of the curves, right? So one thing that we've added is if you have something here in your HUD, now you can get that animation menu right here in the HUD dropdown. So it makes it a lot easier if you're working with parameters in the HUD. You can manipulate your keyframes. You can get to the tracks and the F-curves and stuff right from within the HUD. So we'll go ahead and choose Show F-curve, and we can see the curve here. And let's just go ahead and tweak this Y-curve. We can go ahead and adjust the curve here, and we'll just let's actually widen this out a little bit more. Oh, one other thing here with the curves is that we've made it so that they automatically, see, I don't know where we hit it, but they automatically now frame. And that's an option you can turn on or off, but it's super handy to have them automatically frame. So we'll just copy the ease here, and then we can just select these keyframes, and we can just paste that ease. And you can see that it really doesn't matter what the distance between frames is. It doesn't matter what the values are. It will just take that ease and interpolate it between each of your frame ranges. And of course, now we get something that looks a little better. Still pretty bad because I'm not a great animator. And I'm doing this really quick. But yeah, that was, one of the things that that copy paste ease is, I think, my favorite little feature in release 23.
Yeah, great quality of life. Somebody was asking about the reflections and if it would acknowledge a blurry reflection. So you've got that reflective floor, but
yeah, it does actually. I don't know if I have any roughness on this floor right now, but that was one of the enhancements to it. I do have a texture. It's kind of hard to see, but let's see if let's bring this down to like 200. Yeah, you can sort of start to see it there. I don't know how else coming across the stream, but
yeah. Well, go up a layer, kill out, remove that material, and just change the roughness slider.
Yeah. Like this.
And so now we should be able to see that. Yeah, it's super sharp. And then you can get the blurred material. Even the background, you can see the background is reflecting in with those the different circles. And then of course you're getting there's a reflection, but there's also sort of a reflection shadow. So those of course will behave differently. Right. Hey, Bob Wamsley is in the chat. We got lots of people hanging out today. Welcome.
Awesome.
You're just talking about how X Particles is already compatible with R23.
Yeah, which is super exciting. Yeah, so great viewport enhancements, back into the animation stuff, the filtering. So we can filter to, let me select my basketball again. We can filter to just the tracks that are animated, just the stuff that's part of a keyframe selection, just the things that are animatable, the stuff that's Espresso driver driven. And then overridden parameters. I noticed that I think it was in your breakdown. You weren't sure what that was, right?
Yep.
So that's for if you're using takes and you have specific parameters like here.
That explains why
the type here
Yeah.
is overridden. So we
I
can
never used takes, so that
check
explains why I
that.
couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, and we can get just the overridden parameter in that take. So that's handy, especially when you're building out takes. So some really cool things here. You get something sort of akin to a channel box. You can filter out just to the animated parameters. So yeah, that's really cool. And then we've added filtering in the timeline as well.
Oh, yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, so that you can go in and filter by, not that one here. You can filter by track name and just pull up just the X or just the Y. And then also commands to pull up the position, scale, and rotation keyframes with the shortcut. Lots of little, and commands down here for the recording, all animated, recording entire hierarchies, deleting keys. We just kept piling in as many animation workflow enhancements as we possibly could.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely better for them to be clustered up. You could, maybe in S22, it's like, oh, here's one little thing. Here's one little. That's better if it's like, okay, check out the animation tools. They've been tweaked and refined more as a group. So it's a good way of focusing in.
Right. Yeah, that was a lot of the focus was, we're trying to kind of look at things. It makes it easier on marketing too if we just look at things a little bit thematically, and push a big set of enhancements in specific areas. So especially, and that's easier to do because we're coming out with releases every 6 months now. Or, not necessarily on a regular schedule, but the last two have been 6 months. And so, if one release is totally focused on UVs and then we come back and do something for the animators and then we go back and do something for, since that way we're not focusing on a single user group and ignoring the others for, a long period of time.
There are a couple of questions coming in about Redshift, so let's pile them up if we can. Somebody was asking if older versions of Redshift are going to work with R23, but I assume because everything has to be compiled, it's pretty much going to only be the newest one?
Yeah, it's only going to be the 3028, I think it is, that came out today, because the plugin itself has to be recompiled. And the Redshift team also worked really hard to make sure that Neutron was the scene node system was supported in Redshift. So we really appreciate that.
Oh, really? I did not know that. So
Yeah.
All the new scene nodes, or formerly known as Neutron, those should work in Redshift. I was getting a lot of questions about that yesterday, and I did not know that. And then, do the Magic Bullet looks work with Redshift as well?
I don't know if they do yet, but they will. I think Dave actually announced that yesterday that they will. They will work if you're rendering to the picture viewer already. And I'm not sure if 3028 includes them in the render view or not.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions about viewport features and Redshift, and that can be a bit of a thing. I haven't done anything in a little bit, but most of the time when you're working with Redshift, a lot of it's going to show up pretty black or like not very refined in the screen. But I don't think anything's changed along those lines, has it?
Well, if you're using the Redshift, let me do a new scene here real quick, and we'll just do a basic thing. If you're using the material nodes for Redshift, they will. So we'll switch the node space here into Redshift, and we will go into Redshift and use node materials for presets. And we'll go ahead and create, takes a second here for everything to refresh here. We'll create a material and drop that on here. And you can see that we do actually get a much better preview when we're using the node presets. And that's because the node API actually provides for render engine developers to provide a much better preview. So this isn't distinct to Redshift. They're just the ones that actually have node-based materials.
And just to catch everybody up, there are two different ways of interacting with materials in Redshift, and I think in several of the other renderers, and that is everybody kind of built out their own system. So like the Redshift one traditionally looked very much like Espresso, but then a couple versions ago in Cinema or Maxon unlocked the ability for third-party developers to use the new node system, so like the material nodes. And so instead of doing that espresso type interface, you can now see that Rick's got the node interface. And apparently, and I did not know that, and it's the same shaders and everything, it's just a better interface, a better workflow. And if you do it this way, you'll get the same render quality, but apparently we can also see it in the viewport. So that's a good reason to learn how to use the Redshift nodes in the new node space.
Yeah, and it's I think it's a much nicer node interface to work with than the Espresso-based ones. There are a few features of this that aren't available, of the Espresso-based interface, that aren't available yet in the node editor. Specifically ones where it interacts with the scene, because the node system didn't really have a scene node concept yet, but now we do, and so we can start to work towards patching those gaps as well.
Nice. It looks like some other people did not know that you could see previs the viewport with nodes if you're using Redshift. So that's pretty cool.
I see that feedback a lot, and I keep trying to encourage people to try out the new nodes, because it does give you a much better preview.
Dean is saying that he likes the old Espresso style, but the node system, I know one of the changes that was made in the new node system is that the nodes were made smaller, right? They were really big, and they've been more streamlined to not take up as much space in the viewport.
Yeah, we did hear that feedback a lot, and we did as much as we could to sort of crunch things down. I think they're 25% narrower, and I think like 15% smaller overall. And then we've also worked on, improving the interactions here with being able to minimize the nodes. So we have heard that feedback, and we're, doing what we can to improve it. But then we also hear feedback on the other side that it's really hard to hit the ports on Espresso because it's so small and compact. So, it's a balance of trying to make things usable and look approachable and all of that. So, we are doing what we can, but we have made them quite a bit smaller in release 23. So give them another shot. Also, as you see here, that new node UI, all the new node UI enhancements that were made for scene nodes, you see in material nodes as well. So, it's one node interface that's supporting all of those, the material nodes and the scene nodes now.
Well, I guess I'll take this question as a general thing, but somebody's talking about how they've posted on forums about like things that they think could improve the interface and whatnot, and they specifically said they had posted to C4D Cafe. But they're asking, they're just kind of asking about those types of inquiries, like what's the appropriate place to put that, and should they expect direct feedback from someone at Maxon in that type of environment? Like, what's a good way of making sure that it's like, hey, here are some thoughts I have here, and making sure that Maxon sees it?
Yeah, I mean, general forums, not necessarily. I try to keep an eye on the forums, but I'm not there on a consistent basis.
And there's a lot of them.
There is a suggestion form that you can fill out that you can get to via the support section of the website. And the PMs do read those suggestions. And so that's a good way. There as well, we're not necessarily going to be able to respond to every piece of feedback that we get. But we are reading the things that come into the suggestion form. And then, especially people who are on the MoGraph Slack, if you're on the Rocket Lasso Slack, typically I'm there. And if you tag me, I'll see feedback that comes in via those forums. Or those Slacks.
Yeah, well, there's so many Slack channels now. There's all the old school forums. Then we do things like these types of live streams and chats where people are talking there. So yeah, there's information everywhere. Quick thing. If for everybody who's here in the Recall live stream, I had installed a bot in the Twitch stream, and it kept on yelling at people. It turned out there was a bunch of moderation checkboxes that were turned on by default. I turned all of those off, so now you can use Nightbot just to get information about like the Slack channel and Recall and things like that. So just a heads up that it's not yelling at you anymore. Like every time everybody said anything with like some caps in the sentence, it'd be like, yo, like stop yelling, blah blah blah, like 5-second ban. But let's jump into another feature, kind of do it by theme. So what's another cool thing to show off here? I guess it'd be sticking on the character theme if we did, but I really dig the new Toon rig put together, the sporty rig that's coming in the content browser. There's also the zombie one. I'm really picky about rigs, and I essentially never use the character builder because I always want to build it myself, because there's going to be a couple controls I want that are beyond what it would do out of the box. But the Toon rig actually implements most of everything that I ever want to think about. So I think I'll actually be using that. I'm going to put you back up on the screen here.
Yeah, and there's a number of characters that are pre-rigged with the Toon rig that are in the content browser, and these are really fun, especially to show the pose library. So R23 has this new pose library, great for productions where they need to have consistency across the animators and have animators hit specific poses. Great for non-character uses as well. We haven't really shown a lot of that, but I know Jonas has a great demo of cabinet doors opening and drawers opening that maybe he'll be showing on one of his bits during the C4D Live or the 3D motion show that's going on right now. But the great thing is that, and you showed this a little bit in your preview, Chris, but this allows us to go in and really easily dial in specific animation poses. And we can do it here in this sort of tree structure, or you can pop out a thumbnail view. And the really cool thing is that if it's all based on the names of the objects. So it can affect all of your objects, or you can go in and say, limit it to the selection hierarchy and affect just one of your objects. So there's lots of flexibility here. You can control multiple objects with one pose library. And the pose libraries are actually stored not as part of your scene file, and that's on purpose because we want you to be able to use them across multiple scene files where you have the same rig being used.
Yeah, that threw me off in the beginning. I was like, wait, this is being saved in my preference file? It's got nothing to do with the scene file itself. But yeah, well, how do I say this? It's unintuitive compared to the workflow we're used to, but ultimately it's a better workflow for being able to, if you're working on a commercial or a TV show or something, you want these to be universal controls. You want to be able to do the character in one scene and in a different scene. And if it was all locked within the one scene, then that'd be almost impossible to start transferring.
Right. And we're going to be, we've got a lot of ideas for how we can continue to iterate on this and also, make it a little bit clearer how to work from an object that's provided, like say in the content library, and apply the poses to those objects. So stay tuned for those types of things coming to the pose library.
Yes. And if you didn't get a chance, check out my R23 feature breakdown, because I got a whole section about creating phonemes on a mouth of a character, of the sporty character there. And once you set up the poses, you can very quickly jump to them or drag it over a little bit. Like I want 50% of an ah sound, and then drag up the smile, and building that all into the poses. And the idea that that could be built into multiple rigs and use that as a universal control is pretty powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I would like to. There's an Umbrella is asking if the new pose library is working with XREFs.
I haven't myself tested that, but we did put in some controls for namespaces and separators so that you can ignore the namespace that the XREF brings in when you're doing name matching. So I would think that perhaps it does, but I can't say 100% because it's not something that I personally have had a chance to test yet.
Yeah, for the most part, I always think that XREFs are used for, like, that's for a team. Like, it's for a team of people who are working across multiple things. If I'm working by myself, it's really easy to copy and paste a character from one scene to another. But if you're in a team, somebody might be working on the rig or updating materials at the same time somebody's working on the scene and somebody else is doing the character animation. And that's when XREFs really shine. So me as an individual or part of a small team, there's a good chance you don't use XREFs too often. So
right.
That's definitely a workflow thing. Let's see if I want to do a little demo here, pull it up just because I was really impressed with it. And it was actually the last thing I learned how to do. Let me pull up my screen. It was actually the last thing I learned how to do in the new features, and that was the motion transfer. Let me see. I don't have these super prepared, so I'm just going to kind of open up some files and see if they're working. So let's see what I've got here. Actually, yeah, this is a good example where I brought in, that's the empty guy, and here's a jump. Okay, cool. Yeah, this is a good setup. So I brought in a character from Mixamo. So this is just a character from Mixamo, and I stripped out all of his animation. I deleted every single keyframe from it. In fact, actually, I did even more than that. I deleted his entire skeleton, like no more skeleton at all. Actually, that is not this file. Apologies. That maybe is this one. Boop. Yes. Or sorry, this one. Okay. So what I did is I brought in the mocap guy, and then I deleted his entire skeleton, no joints whatsoever. And then I drew a brand new one. So I just made these from scratch. And in fact, why don't we even just do one of them right now? So here's like the right shoulder. I'll delete that, and let's make a brand new right shoulder so you can see a little bit of this workflow. And so making the character so I can actually see it, we'll go to a front view, create a new joint, make sure that that is placed in the appropriate spot, which here would be pretty much right there. And E for move, scoot this up. And I'm going to place this right where the shoulder would go. Hold down control, make it child, drag it off to the elbow, drag a copy, and drag this off to the side. In fact, I could probably be holding that control, but there we go. The most simple version of that, make sure it's lined up on the top view. Scoot these over. So I'm not going to be doing a careful job with that at all. And now I'll just rename these. And the renaming is the important part. So I'll rename this right shoulder. And then this one I will name, well, you see how this one's called left arm very specifically, but instead I'm going to say arm right. So change that up a little bit. And this last one will be the right forearm. And this time with no space in there. So I've now made a skeleton. It's got nothing to do with the character whatsoever. So how about we bind it onto the character? So selecting all of those joints, I can select the character as well. Clicking character, bind. We can automatically bind this to the character. Clicking the leg, I can hit R for rotate. And you can now see that these are stuck to the character. It's not going to have like amazing smoothing or anything on it. Actually, I didn't even think about it, but this is actually a really good opportunity to talk about another tool. So this is actually not specifically rigged up here, but you'll see if I bend this leg up, that we're going to be getting some pretty funky bends in the way that that character looks, because it's just the default weighting. And nobody likes painting weights. Actually, you know what's funny is I don't mind painting weights. It's the kind of thing that I can like put a movie on and just zone out and paint weights. It's actually very like soothing to me. But let's go ahead and pop open another new tool, and it's called Delta Mush. I have no idea where that name comes from, but it is the closest thing we have to magic. And that is, if we drop it after another deformer, in this case, a skin deformer, then it is going to do its best to fix all of the motion and stop the different joints from crunching in really funky ways. If I were to grab the right arm here and bend it in, let's compare. So this is what the Delta Mush is giving us. And here is what it's doing without, where it starts getting really chunky on the edges, and just popping in different characters, it can really smooth things out. Now, this is not supposed to be the demo for that. I want to show motion transfer. So I'll undo those, get back in the original pose. One thing that I think is supposed to be important with this is that we work from a T pose here. So I need to define the different parts of this character. I can do that by right-clicking on any part of the hierarchy. In this case, I'll click on Joints, right-click, add a rigging character definition tag. Inside of there, we can open up the manager, which will pop this. Oh, come on. Where'd you go, menu? I just misclicked and lost it in the other screen. There it is. So here is the character definition menu. And you can see I've got an entire sort of hierarchy here. We can see there's a right leg and a torso, the roots, all these different things. What we need to do is link our different character parts into these different sections. So like in the hips, I could drag the hips over. In the left arm, I could drag the left arm over. But if you name everything properly, all we have to do is click Extract Skeleton, and it's going to find all of the names and place them into the appropriate spots. Now, just to spend a moment talking about it, you'll see that on one arm, I only have one like upper arm section and one forearm section. But here I put 1, 2, 3, 4 joints to make up that upper part. But this was able to compensate for that. You'll see on the left arm, there are now 7 joints because there are 3 different joints for the bicep. But in the right arm, there's only 1. So they didn't match, but it can handle that. And just for some quick clarity, because I think it's pretty cool, is simple things like hips. It's searching for the word hips. But then something a little bit more complicated, like the shoulder, it's a clavicle section, but it's looking for the word left and the word shoulder. So if it finds the word left and shoulder, or shoulder and left, or left spacebar shoulder 2, it will be like, oh, okay, cool, that counts, and drop it in. Something like the bicep, the upper arm section, it's looking for the word left and arm, but it's saying don't include something with the word forearm. And we could modify this if we want to. I could say also this could just be comma, so saying or, and I could say I want to find the word, if let's say there's L, if there's an L, which is maybe a little too broad, but like L could be a modifier in that, and arm. So if it finds the letter L and arm, then it will add that in. So you could modify these however you want and make different presets for it. The point being is this is now automatically taken a skeleton that I just whipped out and made randomly myself, slapped it onto a Mixamo rig. And now that it's all defined, we could go into the content browser, and they've added a new motion capture section. Inside here is a bunch of original motion capture data that was recorded. I forget, you guys got some company to do this, but these are original to Maxon now, original to this library.
Yeah, well, actually, it's one of our social media team members, Marta, is a motion capture performer. And
no way.
So we were able to set up a socially distanced motion capture session. And these are all original motion captures at 60 frames per second. A great library of basic motions that can get you started.
Yeah, it's super cool. Now, when I originally was tinkering around, I was like, well, obviously this is going to work with Mixamo stuff. It's just natural. So many people use Mixamo as their animations. But now it's like, okay, but now I'm making my own rig. I'm going to make it do, I put in these joints wherever I wanted them. So now if I were to do something like pull in static jump, you can see I've got a new skeleton brought in. It's actually quite different. Let me hide mine. You see that the spine, well, the shoulders are approximately the same, but like this arm doesn't have those extra joints. There's a bunch of fingers. There's all this extra foot information that mine does not really have, not in the same way for sure. But if I set this up properly, and you never know if I did, I can now click on my brand new joint setup here, click Create Solver, and now it's targeting my new character definition. So what is the source character definition? Well, all of the motion capture data already comes in pre-built. So I can just drag this over. And now, well, okay, I messed up. When I renamed that arm, I think I broke it. So that was me. But you can now see that this character is transferring that information over. And yeah, sorry, I broke the arm by renaming it. But all of that has transferred over here. And that is working. And I'm actually pretty blown away by the different things that transfer over this well, because I did bring in just the raw Mixamo. Let me see where he is. I think, yeah, the warrior. So there's this warrior character from Mixamo. And this is the default skeleton that it comes with. So I'll right click on that, rigging character definition. By default, the way they built Manager, it can read the Mixamo one, so I can extract it, and you can see 66 different joints got fed in. This is straight out of Mixamo. Let's add some extra keyframes, go into the content browser, and pull in something else. I do like this waving animation. I think it's just funny on a character like this. So I'm going to transfer, I want to create a solver to transfer the animation from the waving to this new character. So now if I hit play, this Mixamo rig is doing this new animation that came with the content browser, which I think is super crazy. And then I guess just to put a pin in it, they let me find him. Let's see what state this is in. This is my little robot. I haven't really released him in any big form yet, but I had a big complicated rig on him. He had all this rigging controls. I went and ripped all the controls out. So now he's just a series of joints, and these aren't even bound joints. This is just a hierarchy of joints. And I put all those different parts as children of those joints. All I did was went through and renamed the joints and put them in a T-pose. And now if I go into the content browser and grab So I'll keep it simple again because I know I've done tests with it. Opening up the waving from afar, you see it's super huge, so I want to just compare it somewhat reasonably. So I'll crank up my character big to be approximately the same size. And now right click. Well, actually, I already defined it, but just so you can see, I'll delete that. Add a new rigging character definition. Open the manager. Extract. And now you see that this character only has 18 joints that transferred over. Like, he doesn't have a head joint. He doesn't have a neck. So a lot of things don't transfer over specifically there. But by creating the create solver, I can now link him to the waving animation. And this character that in no way was designed to work with this has now transferred over that animation way better than it has any right to be getting transferred over. So I actually find this pretty exciting. I think there's going to be a lot of great opportunities to play with this. So once you wrap your head around it, it's real powerful.
Yeah, so, the basic idea here is to sort of extrapolate whatever rig you happen to have into sort of a common definition. So, rather than worry about how many bones you've created or joints you've created in the forearm, we just want to know that it's the forearm. And then we can easily retarget from forearm to forearm and get the animation. Somebody's asking, there's a couple questions about the mocap library. Will Maxon add to it? I think you could expect that we probably will. Question about quadrupeds. There are no quadruped animations in there yet. We'd either have to find some non-human mocap performers, or we'd have to get our mocap performer to get on hands and knees. But one thing I did want to mention with regards to this is that the character definition tag is set up and provided with a template that's based around a bipedal human, but it does provide for the ability to set up your own custom preset templates. So you could create a quadruped template and retarget quadruped to quadruped. We haven't provided that, but it is more than possible. And another thing that's really cool, Orestes, who was the UX designer on this, actually showed me a demo where he had portions of the animation that were actually being retargeted based on one, so like he was adding a hat, where the hat animation was retargeted separately from the main biped animation.
So in theory, I could take motion capture from a set of legs and then have it walk, and then have the upper torso be linked to something different if we set it up correctly.
I think so. That's my understanding. I couldn't do that demo for you, but I did see it at one point.
Andrew's asking about transferring the Mixamo animations. And yes, I was just using the ones that Maxon provided because those are cool and new. But you could take one Mixamo character and transfer its animation to a different Mixamo character, or from your character to a Mixamo character, and kind of any combination, as long as the skeletal structure has been identified. And like I said, you could manually drag each of those in. Like, here's the neck, here's the head, here's the wrist. You could do that, but renaming it makes it so that in the future you can do a one-click solution.
Right.
So, yes. So, and I did do all of those combinations myself, so it definitely does work.
Yeah, and the great thing about this is that, because we're using the character definition tag to define a common understanding of the parts of the character, as we provide presets like motion capture library, presets like tune rigs and things like that, we can provide the character definition in such a way that those will just, be able to work together, in a very smart way.
Yeah, I'm pretty blown away by just what's happening underlying it. As long as they start out in about the same pose, like starting out in a T pose is a good way to do it, because typically that's how you create a character and rig a character. But I think as long as they start in the same pose when you build their library, then they can transfer between each other. So that's my understanding. But yeah, it's a really neat feature. It's one that I was like, I don't know if I'm going to have much of a use for this. And as soon as I could transfer it to my little robot guy, it's like, okay, this is actually pretty incredible. So yeah, that is another exciting one. So let's see. We will definitely get to some node stuff, everybody. We're kind of, I guess in my head, I'm just saving that for the end. So keep those questions in mind. Feel free to repost if we don't address something specifically. Let's see what else we've got. There's a couple questions about the new formats, like the FBX animation stuff, and there is some USD stuff, right? I'm actually not an expert in this. I tend to start in Cinema and end in Cinema, so very rarely do I end up doing any importing and exporting. So I'll let you take this one.
So USD, of course, is a hugely popular format that's open sourced by Pixar, getting a lot of adoption. And we've made the first steps towards supporting it with basic geometry and geometry color import in release 23. No material or animation support yet, but this is an iterative process, and we'll be building those things in down the road. There was a question about whether it makes XREFs obsolete. And I think that, it's, for those of you who are familiar with the format, it does have sort of a workflow built around it that is very similar to what the types of things we do with XREFs. I don't think that it necessarily makes XREFs obsolete, but I think that there's definitely some opportunities to build out better workflows for referencing that aren't necessarily completely tied to the USD format, but give us a lot of flexibility with the C4D format as well. So we'll see how that develops through future versions.
What does USD stand for again?
Universal Scene Description.
Oh, there you go. And then in addition, I just know a couple of the things off the top of my head. A couple of things were tweaked with the FBX export, and that is now when you export an animation, before it would be baked out kind of as a point level animation, but now it could be exported so that the skin is bound to the joints. So things like a character being brought into a video game engine, it can actually work from the skeleton and not from like preset, baked.
Yeah. Now we've got the Cineware based connections with both Unreal and Unity, which folks are really loving. But we do still have, there's workflows where FBX is still sort of the best common denominator for getting into game engines. And we added those features in order to sort of aid the FBX workflow. So these are some things that my CV Smart Export plugin did, being able to export the marker ranges as separate animation clips so that when you import into the game engine, they're already split out. And then also being able to simplify, when you look at like a character rig like the Toon Rig or like the advanced biped, there's often multiple joint chains. There's, an FK joint chain, an IK joint chain, and then a final bind joint chain. And those confuse game engines. And so this feature basically will bake all of the animation down into the bind joint chain and remove the other skeletons so that there's no confusion when you export.
Mohammed was asking, I was saying how the T-pose was needed for the motion transfer. And I'm not 100% sure that is a necessary workflow. I know when I wasn't doing a T-pose, I had a couple arms twisting in ways I didn't expect. But I think it's because the skeletal structures could be built in all these different ways. It's being like, okay, you're telling me that these are starting in the same pose. So I know that's what they sort of look like. So as I rotate, I can rotate approximately that same way, even though the skeletal structure is completely different. If they don't have some sort of common denominator, it doesn't know what it should be comparing one thing to another. It would be my understanding.
Yeah, and there is, I've got to be honest, I haven't played with this particular feature too much. I know there's the option to set reference poses, but I'm not sure exactly how that works and how it factors in with the T-pose. The main piece of feedback I've gotten over the years with retargeting is that it needs to handle differently rotated joints. So I just kept yelling at the developers and the UX designers and the QA folks, make sure it handles multiple differently rotated joints and we'll be good.
Yeah, no, and it definitely does. Like I said, my robot here was built with not in mind at all. When everything comes in from Mixamo, I think everything is rotated very cleanly. When I made my own skeleton on the motion capture guy, there's no rotation. They're all just perfectly vertical. So yeah, it is definitely handling things rotated to different initial states. But you just want the T-pose. Yeah, I guess that's the point, is if they're in a T-pose, then it doesn't matter what the rotations were in the beginning. It didn't have to be identical. Otherwise, we'd have to be using the same skeleton for everything, and obviously that's not appropriate. You can't use the same skeleton for everything, and now we don't have to.
Right.
Let's see. Well, somebody's got a question about this, and I think it's a good transition into a new topic, and that would be the new UV tools. So two things. First of all, do you have a UV demo set up? Because I just essentially have the same one for my video.
I do. It's not a very good one, honestly, but I can pull it up.
Yeah, so we can do that. And then I'm going to pull you up on the screen for yours if you would like to do it. Otherwise, I can pull mine up as well. But there's a question that I've seen this posted around. I've seen it as comments in the various chats in different places. So I'll just take this as a community-based thing. People are very interested in the UDMI, the UDIMS workflow. I'm seeing that again and again and again. I don't even know what it is. I know it's just a different UV workflow. So from lots of users to you at Maxon, that seems like something that there's a lot of interest in.
Yeah, and definitely we've heard that feedback. With release 23, we chose to focus on supporting multiple objects in one texture space, which is
awesome.
Yeah, and it's especially great for workflows in game texture workflows and product design workflows. So we chose to focus on that, and the main reason why we went that way versus UDIMS is there's a lot of other aspects of Cinema 4D that we need to make sure are accommodated with UDIMS. We need to make sure that the baking workflow is taken care of. We need to handle texture assignment and handle it in a way that supports third-party renderers. So there's a lot more that goes into UDIMS than simply packing into multiple tiles. So while it's completely and totally on our radar, it's just not something that we were quite ready to tackle just yet.
Yeah, well, and just as a quick thing, I'll pull this back up on screen. I just want to throw this out there for everybody. It is very easy for everybody to say, like, how about this? How about this? Where's about that one, my one pet feature that I want? Well, first of all, keep in mind for every one feature that's added in, there's going to be a dozen other people who didn't get their pet feature. So that's just the way it is. And everybody acts like, it's like, why didn't they just do this? It's like, well, do you realize that this has to work with every third-party renderer, with our old system? It's got to work with a new system coming in. It's got to work with the way our UV, like recall, which on the surface seems like a pretty simple workflow tool, is over 9,000 lines of code. And that's for like being able to double click and store an object, double click and bring it back. And like when it comes to like, this is going to interface with possibly who knows what type of polygon layouts that people are giving us, and somebody else's like UDIM workflow, and make sure it works with every renderer and every export and everything. It's like there is a lot involved in that. So yeah, not everything can be done all the time. Yeah, UDIM and ACEs are definitely the things that the general crowd is like, oh, where's my ACEs? Where's my UDIM?
I can assure you that we are hearing these four-letter words, and that we know that those are big user requests, and we will address them when we have an opportunity to.
Bernd is what Bernd is saying in the chat. There's one feature that he's wished for since starting working at Maxon 14 years ago, which is now starting development. What a tease!
Oh, interesting. I'm not even sure what feature that is.
But anyway, we'll leave that as a tease and go to Rick's screen to do some UV stuff. And depending on what you have covered, I could always pull mine up as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've got a basic sort of nail polish bottle here. And, I've already selected some seams, so we'll just go ahead and hit the UV unwrap button, and we can go ahead and peel those things apart. Now, one of the things that we've added is the ability to simply select any edge. So if we say that edge is the one we want to have, horizontal, we can just hit Align UV Islands, and it'll line that up. If we want this edge to be aligned, we can select that and line it up.
So snap to horizontal or vertical, and it's whichever one is closest to. If it's more vertical, it'll snap to the vertical.
Exactly. And something I don't think we've really mentioned, but we also one thing that was missing in 22 was the ability to do path selection in the UV view, and so we've added that. So that's really handy. And the ability to select a group of polygons and hit rectangularize, and it'll just actually pop that out into a completely even rectangle. And you have options here in the cog wheel to adjust the alignment and whether you want the distribution to be equal or based on the existing distribution.
So don't skip over the name. There's a parameter now in Cinema 4D called equidistant distribution, which is the greatest name for a parameter ever.
Yeah, and then the option to straighten specific things too. So if we go in here again to the path selection and we select this edge and we just want to straighten it, we used to have the line up tool, but it would straighten it and put it like down here and huge and completely mess up your layout. But now it just kind of fits it right into where you're already working. We've also added the option to use Cinema 4D's built-in snapping. And we can snap to vertexes, edges, the grid, which I'm not actually showing here. We can go ahead and show the grid.
Even the grid is new, right?
Yeah, the grid itself is new. We had to create a grid so that we could snap to it. But yeah, so we can turn on grid snap, and we can go in here and go to a specific point, and we can just go ahead and move that, and you can see how it snaps. Snap to existing vertices. So really powerful snapping here. And this is important also just because it allows us to move the snapping out of the specific tool, which helps us move towards sort of making these tools more global so that they'll behave the same in UV and 3D views.
Yeah, exactly.
So lots of cool little additional enhancements in here in the UV workflow to go along with the stuff that you got in S22.
Yeah, and then talking about those.
The multiple objects. We'll take this lid here, and we'll just go ahead and go into edge mode and unwrap that. And again, this is a perfect example here where it unwrapped, but it's not perfectly rectangular, and maybe that's the way we want it. So we can just go in here and hit rectangularize. It automatically separates it out into a grid, makes it into a grid, and aligns it properly. This one here, we can just, it looks like it's already rectangular, but we can just select one of the edges and align it. And then we can select both the bottle and the lid, and if we want these in the same texture space, we can just go down here to the packing and hit apply, and it'll go ahead and pack those into the same texture space.
Yeah, it was so cool to be able to drop a bunch of objects in and say, okay, all of you share the same space, but you're completely unrelated objects.
Yeah. Yeah, so lots of great new enhancements here, sort of wrapping up the S22 R23 UV focus. So yeah.
Yeah, and we didn't even talk about any. There was a lot of huge UV stuff added in S22 as well. So if you were the kind of that 0.5 release, the half-year release, to say, when you get R23, if you were on 21, you didn't have subscription. Now when you jump to R23, you'll get all the S22 and the R23 features, meaning you're going to get a whole bunch of UV tools that are pretty nice.
Yeah, like this box, for instance, if we select this, let's just go ahead and kill the existing UVs, and I can just go in here to automatic UV and use this new automatic UV packed, and I get really a beautiful UV that I can work from, and then of course my texture's not lined up anymore, but you can see that, we've got the very beginnings of all I need to do is move these islands around and align them with the image. And we do now have pixel snapping as well, so that we can make sure that those UV edges line up right on the pixels.
Pixel perfect.
Yep.
Actually, I didn't even think about that. That's for perfectly lining up on a pixel edge. You don't want to be on that like gray transition from one and not one. So there you go. I was like, I did it. It's like, oh yeah, that's cool, but when would I use that? It's like, oh, that's what you use it. It's actually really important.
Yeah.
And just like a lot of things when it comes to some of these new tools, what's really cool is just like, things like bind, and now we can use the delta mush to transfer things pretty often, especially if you're on a deadline. Like you've now opened up the UVs of this object, clicked one button, and it's ready to paint on or transfer something onto. Yes, we could spend a little bit of time and clean it up more, but right now, it's totally usable with one click.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say when you said you enjoyed weight painting. Is that well, you're doing it for fun. You're not on a deadline.
Yeah, exactly. the let's see. What was? Oh, we haven't talked about the Remesher yet.
Yeah.
What's the? I don't know what kind of demo you have. I mean, I really
You've
love
got
the.
some good demos for this, I think.
Yeah.
So
If I
why
haven't,
don't you
yeah,
go ahead
and actually, we can even spend an extra second doing it because it uses more of the tools. I didn't do this in my full demo, but I had a. Let's make sure that pops up. Okay, I had my very first tutorial for Rocket Lasso was a. Okay, I can't navigate and talk at the same time. So my very first tutorial on Rocket Lasso was with Aaron Covret, and we did a full photogrammetry workflow where we took photographs, put them into something that's called a mesh room, and then automatically took the photos, made a mesh, and it's like a whole big tutorial there. And we had to spend a lot of time exporting, importing. There's a bunch of different times we had to do that for the UVs to remesh things. But now we've got a lot of that built straight into Cinema. So if I go in and pop open, presumably this file, let's see, give it a moment because it's super huge. Yeah, okay, I can work from this one. So I'll delete that and pop this open. So this is, hit NA. Here is a stump. I took, I think, 120 different photos with an iPhone and then put them into Alice Vision, a different piece of free software, and it automatically converted those photos into this mesh, which is cool. It did the textures, everything's great. But if I hit NB and go to polygon mode, we can now see that it's solid black because there are so many polygons here. It's super crazy. So you can't work. Yeah, I mean, yes, this works. It's going to run fast in the viewport because it's one object, but this is not exactly optimized in any way. Well, now there is a brand new tool transferred in. I think it's based on instant meshes, right?
Yes.
I'm going to copy and paste the object and hide the original. Actually, that's a really good chance to use recall, but let's not do that right now. There's a brand new remesh tool, and I can click on the remesh and drop this model as a child of it. Now, let's be fair to the remesh. I'm throwing like hundreds and thousands of polygons at it. So my workflow that I like doing is taking this and dropping it down to some reasonable number. So I'm dropping it down to 10% of what the polygons used to be. And you see it's a parametric object. It's a generator. I can just throw things in as a child, and it's going to be able to take whatever mesh we feed it in and completely deconstruct it and rebuild it up using as few quads as possible, make them flow. I'm sorry, as well, optimizing to have as few polygons as possible, trying to make as many of them quads as possible. And there's extra tools, but we'll talk about those in a moment. But like I said, we're throwing a gigantic mesh at this thing. So I'll let that calculate through one time. I do remember it took a little bit.
We did build this in a way that, there we go. I mean, I think that the generator workflow is super cool. And it's actually built in a way that it does have this delay at the beginning while it's processing, but then you can adjust the percentage of reduction without having to do all the recalculation over again.
I actually didn't know that. Well, it's dangerous to change things on the fly in a demo, but you can see that it took a little bit to calculate that, but you can see it now has 10% of the polygons that it had before, but look at how smooth that this now looks compared to what it was. So personally, we're now at 1/10, so everything just runs quicker. What I'm going to do is make this editable, and it bakes that down. And that's just going to make it so I can demo the rest of this even faster. And that is, I'll create another new remesh. I'll drop this one in. And now it's going to be pretty dang quick for me to say, I want, let's say 10% of that result. And now you can see very quickly I was able to update and show me 10% and drop it down to 5%. And it calculates pretty quick. And now we're down to 5. But personally, I think this one can drop all the way down to 2%. And now you can see how few polygons we have here as compared to what was originally here. And I think I'm at 0.2% at this point of the original polygons. Now, the way it's doing this by default, you see everything's kind of at this diagonal, almost a perfect 45, but there's additional settings like follow splines. So I already prepped these so we don't have to make them manually. I have a couple circle splines here and a couple of straight lines that kind of trace the overall shape of the stump. So having done that, I'll lock that so I can select all of my splines, drop them in, unlock it. And now that's going to use those as a guide. And now you can see that instead of being 45-degree angle, these are now lining up pretty much on the 90-degree. And then it transitions up to the stump and we get the super low poly version. I think that is working great. Make that editable. It is now baked down. don't need these materials. It's not transferring the materials over because this is a mess of materials the way it comes in. These are all exploded out into the most ridiculous places when it comes in from the Mushroom software. So what I would like to do, and we'll just spend a moment doing it. We can talk
it'd
about
be
UVs.
interesting. Did you re-import from Mushroom in 23?
Or
did you open this?
This was my older file.
And another thing that I want to mention is that there was some significant work on the OBJ import and export in release 23. It now supports sequences and also supports vertex colors, which is something that was a request specifically for users of ZBrush and Mushroom to be able to pull in the vertex colors via OBJ.
I did not know that. That's cool. But anyway, you can see I've got the super low poly version of this object, and I'll just show you the rest of the workflow because I think it's really cool. We need to get some UVs on this object. So obviously we have a way of doing that. Let me make sure. It's going to jump onto my other screen, but I'll change my layout to... It's hiding behind the windows.
So while you're working on that, there is a question about does it do the UV map? Does it transfer the UVs? So the Remesher uses our new modeling core, which actually does a good job of, and I don't know what UVs were on this before you started remeshing it, but the new modeling core does a good job of transferring
I don't want to click
vertex attributes. So things like vertex color and UVs. Now, it doesn't do a great job of transferring UVs in this case because when you remesh an object, you can't really keep the seams in the same place without doing some tricks and stitching and trying to avoid cutting on the seam, remeshing at the seams and things like that. So it will just kind of obliterate the seams. The UV map won't translate very cleanly, but things like vertex color should.
Excellent. So just to finish off the thought here, just to show you the whole workflow and how I'm completely blown away by this type of thing, I was just able to do a one-click unwrapping of the UVs in the UV mode. And now I've put a 100% reflective material on top of this model. So now if I were to unhide the original model, and I would like to, I don't even know if I have to, it might mess up a couple little spots, but would probably be a good idea would be to inflate this out and then transfer them. But I'm not even going to do that step. Now that I have nice UVs, I should be able to right-click, create a material, bake material, output this as something. Let's say I guess it doesn't take too long, so we'll just do it for real. I want to bake we'll keep it simple, a JPEG, and we'll make it bigger, 1080, 1080. Under options, I want this to, I guess I have to save it somewhere. So we'll save to episode 23, renders, stump. All right, and then under options, I can say I want to bake only the reflection. Is there anything else? I think that's pretty much all I need. And I'm going to do a preview to see if I did this correctly. Okay, yep, seems like I did. So that looks good. If I click bake, it's actually going to process a 1000 by 1000 texture that is now saved into, because I reflected it, one completely unrelated UV layout has transferred to a different UV layout. And just so that we get the nice high res one, I'll revert my file. And we can now see, oops, I think I might have saved while we were just working. Let me see if I can drop this material on. Dang it. I think I saved over the file as we were just working. Yep, I did. Well, that's my bad. Well, I just lost my UVs and I'll have to redo it for my demo scene. But yeah, you can transfer over the perfect UV, the perfect material onto the super low poly one, and it looks exactly perfect. You can see it in my full 1.5 hour long demonstration of R23 features. Let's see about questions here. Actually, yeah, does the Remesher in any way maintain UVs? Do you know?
I mean, it theoretically tries, but they won't be the same at all because it's going to blow right across the seams because the seams won't be there anymore. The edges that define the seams won't be there anymore because they've been moved by the Remesher.
Yeah, actually, we had several questions about that. The Nina is asking about UDIMs again. So once again, we covered that a little bit ago. It's definitely on. Maxon has heard everyone talking about that they'd like it. That's where we've landed on that one right now. Let's see. More conversation about that. Yep. So I just want to show the remesher. I mean, it's applicable in a lot of other places as well. Creating low poly proxies to run soft body simulations is going to be one of my favorite places to use it. The back to the screen.
Yeah, it's especially great when dealing with any sort of VDB stuff, with any sort of geometry reconstruction from images or from the scene reconstruction in the motion camera. So yeah, definitely comes in handy. And I really dig the generator workflow. I think that opens up some new possibilities with it too.
Speaking of generators, actually bad transition because it's speaking of deformers. Do you want to quickly show just a couple tweaks on the gizmos for the?
Oh yeah, sure. Let me switch.
It's one of those. It's a tiny thing, but it's one of those. Okay, you think it's tiny, but it actually makes a big deal.
Yeah, so this was something that multiple places had lots of user requests for, and especially on some of the forums and stuff. This was I said we've got different users that we think about when we're building these things, and this was the John Bosley feature because he was the first one, I think, who asked me for it. But we did a number of things with the deformers. The first thing is, lots of feedback that people just couldn't see which direction their deformers were pointed. And so we added these arrows in the bend deformer. And then on things like bulge, we've got arrows here. That sort of show what they do and which direction they're going to move. Like here with shear, you can see that, as we adjust the angle, you can see which direction it's going to shear. And then with the taper, we've got the arrows pointing inward. And the UX team with Twist here, you can see these are kind of funky shaped arrows, but the UX team actually did a lot of work to make sure that whatever view you're in, you would be able to see this arrow and see which direction it's pointing. So lots of work really went into what's really a pretty simple looking feature. But again, it's one of those workflow things that I think people are going to really dig. It's really going to help the way they work. Another thing we did is just make it so that when you deactivate a deformer, it goes away. That didn't happen in the past.
I didn't know that one.
And you've mentioned in your things the fact that these are sliders now. A number of these we've found some places where sliders would come in handy. Also, let's just create some text here. I'll use the motext. We'll just say R23, and we'll get off of this awful font. I always say get off this awful font, but I don't know which font to choose.
Yeah, it's good to have one font in your library just to go to. Like the official font of Rocket Lasso is Futura, so it's like okay, yeah. I can get to the nice chunky font or a nice clean elegant one. Then
so we'll go ahead and give this a regular grid so that we can do some deformation on it, and we'll just go ahead and add a bend deformer. What we've done here with the alignment here is we've added drop downs so that you can really quickly choose your alignment. So I can choose Y plus and hit fit to parent, and it'll align to Y plus in size appropriately. I can hit Z plus and fit to parent, it'll align to Z plus. I can hit X plus is actually what I want, and hit fit to parent and align that. And now I can really easily bend in this direction. And if I say, oh, actually, I wanted to bend top to bottom, I can just change to Y plus and hit fit to parent, and it'll just adjust. So, really nice quality of life enhancements again here on the deformers. So, yeah, hope folks enjoy those.
Yep. The tiny things make the biggest deal. So let's see. questions from people. Somebody's asking about centering a bend, but I mean, there's not a magic way to do it. But if you set it to unlimited, you can bend from both directions.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the best way to do it. But that's actually kind of an interesting thing to talk about is with the advent of scene nodes, we're going to have interesting opportunities moving forwards where if somebody wants a center bend deformer, they don't necessarily have to be coded in C++ as a plugin or as a feature of Cinema 4D. You'd actually be able to build it out using nodes and distribute it to folks.
Exactly. It looks like we're starting to get a bunch of questions coming in about the scene nodes. So maybe it's finally time to jump over there.
Is it time?
I think it's time. Now, something to throw out there, everybody, is I'm going to let Rick steer here because I'm curious to see the way he puts it together. And I'm still learning a lot of the raw nodes and the ways they combine. But I'm going to be doing another live stream on Friday with Casey Hupke, and the entire topic is going to be about scene nodes. So, yeah, I don't know. It might be a big Casey rant about, where's this one node that I want? But we'll see. It should be fun. I've never done a stream with Casey, but he's a great guy. I'm looking forward to it.
I still remember the extended rants from him demanding scene nodes, as a matter of fact. So yeah. I think he's kind of a happy camper now to get what he's got. But the scene node system is super powerful. It is just the building blocks. I mean, if we've been comparing it a lot to Legos, and what we've given you right now is a bunch of 1x1, 1x2, and 4x1 Legos. You really, what we haven't given you is the bigger pieces, or the instruction kit. And that's a lot of the reason why we've set it up as a technical preview for now. But you've got a lot of the low level pieces. You can build stuff with it. It's a little bit more work at this point. But great features around, especially creating lots of copies of objects, a la the cloner, which we call distributions in scene nodes. And specifically that because it allowed us to show off the power of the new interface, or the power of the new core. As far as performance, and then work around parametric modeling operations, and a lot of work on that, especially because we had this great new modeling core that was already prepared for being able to implement with scene nodes. So it was a great test bed of how some of the new core work we're doing in other areas can actually apply into the scene node system and work really easily. Yeah, Baron Casey will never be happy. He'll find something else to complain about, I'm sure. But
it's not about making him. Yeah, it's not about making him happy. It's about how worked up does he not get? then it's pretty good.
It's always about satisfying the requests of our users, and Casey makes his requests known.
Very known.
So, here we've got an interesting setup. First of all, we're pulling in some geometry from classic Cinema 4D. We can do that using the legacy object import node. I'll just do that from scratch here. Legacy object import. And, we just grab the object we want, hit update parameter ports. It's going to bring in all of the main parameters. We can right click here and you can see we've got access to all the rest of the object parameters. So we can feed those into our system. That's going to output geometry, and I'm going to feed that into a geometry op. Most of what you do in scene nodes, you're going to want to work with these op nodes because they're kind of like they're the highest level nodes that we're offering right now, where they kind of roll up the functionality. And here we have an operator group, which is essentially rolling up a bunch of functionality so that we can feed it into the op stream. The way this op stream works is we're feeding geometry into the op stream with the geometry op, and then we're doing some stuff with it in the operator group. And then we're feeding a material into the op stream. If I twirl this down, you can see that at this point the op stream includes geometry and material. And I'll show you in another scene in just a bit how the op stream data continues to build up. But let's go ahead and pop open this operator group, and we can look at how this specific effect is constructed. And what you can see here is we're grabbing the geometry and we're triangulating it. And then from that, what we've done is we've implemented a switch. And this is just because we're activating a dual mesh functionality. So let me see here if I can let me get this geometry op in a spot where I can easily grab it. Soloing and muting and things like that are something that we're looking at adding soon, but we don't have yet. I'm going to go into lines mode here. We'll make sure that this elephant is hidden. And wow, magic bullet looks.
Yeah, it's going to be like, look at that elephant. He's glowing.
So you can see that here we're triangulating this geometry, and then we're feeding it into this switch mode, and then we are subdividing it. And when we do that, we end up with something that looks like this. And you can see that we're getting this when you take a nice quad mesh and you triangulate it and then subdivide it, you get this nice sort of hexagonal grid. And then what you can do with that is melt the center point of the grid. So, and the reason why this works is because the system has a concept of active selection. We were talking about this a little bit in Chris's stream yesterday. So it knows sort of the initial geometry it came in with, and it keeps that as consistent as possible as it is doing the geometry operations. So when we're doing this melt, what it's doing is it's melting the original points before we triangulated and subdivided. So we're melting down, and so we get something like just these hexagons, and then we're able to inset those, and we're then going to delete, and we create sort of just the outer grid, and then we can extrude that outer grid and get a really cool dual mesh type of an effect, which then we feed into a subdivision surface and smooth out. Or alternately, we do a polygon bevel on it, and we've got sort of the scales themselves without the non-hollow version. And the cool thing about this again is that we're able to wrap this all up into one asset that users can really easily get in and play with: the offset variation, the offset, the inset amount, and then even whether it's hollow or not.
Could you go
while I was working on showing you this?
Could you show a little bit about promoting a parameter?
Sure.
Or how you made these controls?
Yeah, so basically if I want, let's go ahead and redo that hollow. So that's basically just feeding from this switch node here. So we just go ahead and drag it over here, and we can choose to propagate the port. Or you can right click and choose add input and add new input, and then just drag that input over into index. And now that's the port that you're propagating. And that'll show up here. See right here, it's showing up as a drop down 0 or 1. If you want to actually change the interface for these things, there's a resource editor. And this is something that existed already with material nodes. We've made some tweaks to it. It's still very nerdy. This is even nerdier than the node system themselves. But you can go in here and change the GUI from an enum, which is a drop down, to a bool. And now you can see that that index is a check mark on and off. So, definitely this is low level, a step above doing the programming itself, but lots of possibilities here, and great to play with. If we create a new scene here, let's just go ahead and create a sphere. And again, you're always going to want to go for these ops, which unfortunately show up at the very bottom of the list. We're going to work on filtering this better. but we're going to grab the primitive op. You can see that from the primitive op, we had the opportunity to choose between all of the different primitives, and we'll just feed that right into the scene node. So we can easily go and choose a cylinder or a platonic, all those options there.
As a very base explanation of something, and it's something I trip over still a little bit. So this primitive op is an entire operation, meaning it's kind of like, this is all of the information needed for that object, and now you can output that. But you can also just search for sphere or any of these shapes and bring it in as a standalone sort of object, but it's not an operation. So you can search for sphere.
If we bring in the sphere geometry here,
yeah,
you see that what this has is a geometry output. So we're just getting the geometry portion of the sphere. But by using the primitive op, we're actually packaging it as sort of an object, Yeah. So it's kind of like if you think about the objects in cinema as containing geometry, color, other types of matrices, position, scale, rotation, other types of data like that. The op is sort of the highest level of that. If you just grab the sphere, you're getting just the geometry. But the cool thing about this system is that there's something called the primitive group. If I take a primitive group and build whatever I want with geometry in this primitive group and just feed out a geometry and save this as an asset, I can actually have it show up in this menu. So I can create my own primitive that way. And I'll show you with the distribution in just a minute how we do that.
Cool.
So let's add a distribution. And again, we're going to grab the distribution op here. And again, you've got a drop down here where you can choose between all of the various options. We'll just choose a spiral.
It's kind of, this node is kind of like the core of a cloner is the best way to think about it.
Yeah, totally.
But a cloner doesn't have a spiral setting.
Right. And that's one of those things where we've taken the opportunity to start building up new distributions because it's relatively easy in this new system. So we can adjust the count, of course. We can do all the clonery type of things that we're used to. But one of the things I was going to show you here is that, here out of the primitive op, the op stream has geometry. We feed it into the distribution, and the distribution is going to add a whole lot of additional data into the op stream. So we have index, which is actually an array of indexes. Ratio is sort of an array of the percentage from 0 to 1 of each clone. We have the color that's being fed from all of these. The geometry is still being passed through. Everything that you put into the op stream stays in the op stream throughout the whole time. And then you have the matrices, an array again, and then the children.
For anybody who's not familiar, an array is a programming term, and it essentially just means a giant list of information. So a regular index is just one number, like this is index 0. An array of indexes would be, let's say, 100 different indexes all in a list.
0, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it's just a list. Exactly. Thanks for that. Somebody was just asking in chat for Mandelbulb. So there's your Mandelbulb distribution. And here's Mandelbrot. And some of these actually don't currently output color, but you can do something like drop in a color op, and we'll drop that right onto the stream, and that then allows us to modify the color. But then if we want to actually modify it based on, say, the ratio, what we can do is take something like a basic gradient, and we'll feed that from the ratio. We'll feed that into position, feed the result into our color. And now we can modify this gradient in order to control the colors that appear on the clones. Or actually, let's just go in here and choose load preset and grab something like heat 2. And you can see that we're able to get effects like this really easily. So that's sort of the basis of how the system works. And I promised to show how the distributions, how you can build a custom distribution. I got to find that scene now. It is here. And so what we have here is a distribution group. And again, I told you that any of these groups, like the primitive group, the distribution group, the effector group, allow you to build up these effects, and you can save them as assets, right? So we've got this distribution group, and you can see that what I'm doing here is just some math that actually builds a can stack distribution. So if I feed this into the op input, you can see that we're able to stack cans, and we're stacking them in, the proper way, where you can't put a can unless there's, two cans under it, type of thing. And again, I've created a very, flexible interface for this. Right now, it's just the distribution group. But if I save this as an asset, and I'll save it as
Casey's in the
triangle
chat.
distribution, put it in preferences, and we'll put it in the distribution group. And now if we go to the distribution group, we'll see the triangle distribution. Also, if we go to this distribution op, we'll see that we have a triangle distribution op. So now we have this as an asset that we can easily pull up at any time. We can choose between spiral and triangle distribution anytime we're building things out. And we have, the ability to use this custom distribution that I've built and to distribute it to other users. So you can use the same workflow to build out primitives, distributions, effectors, all sorts of things within the system.
It's crazy. There's a lot to wrap your head around. Well, and I think this is actually a really important time, and to get your take, because I've been just saying my raw, essentially things I'm guessing or assuming for the future. But this is a tech demo for all purposes. This is not being marketed as something that's production ready and you should be, tackling it. This is Maxon putting something out into the world saying like, hey, here's the first pass of the stuff. What do you think about it? How do you think of the way it's laid out and kind of everything about it, like the way it's named, how easy is it to use? But right now it doesn't exist in the object manager at all. I was surprised to find out it works in the regular renderer and Redshift, which is cool, but it's a very specific workflow here, and it's only the beginning. And my assumption here is that, my uninformed assumption is that it's going to work a lot like the material nodes were implemented, where there's all these different nodes, and then using those nodes, Maxon put together the Uber material, which is as similar to the old style as it could possibly be, but made out of the nodes. So it's like, okay, it's back to being familiar. You don't have to go into the nodes, but if you want, you can go into the nodes. So I sort of envision a future where when you make a cube, you're not just making a generic hard-coded cube primitive. You're loading a cube that was made from these nodes, and potentially you can zoom into the node. If you want to get complicated, you can zoom into the nodes of the cube and be like, here's new parameters for this cube. Here's the Chris cube that has these extra settings that I can use whenever I want to use them in this really weird and specific way.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the concepts that we're working off of. Nothing shows up in the object manager right now because, quite frankly, it would cripple the system. The system's built to be powerful and have a lot more flexibility than the object manager was built to support. So what we're going to be doing in the next release cycle is building a new object manager that's built to be natively understanding the idea of these nodes. Again, this is going to be an iterative process, but we're super excited about the possibilities as we continue to build out the system.
Yeah, but I will say, I mean, there's going to be a big learning curve. Well, first of all, that's the trick. Is one of the reasons Cinema 4D is popular is because it's pretty easy to use and you can play. There's almost a playfulness built into it where it's like, oh, let's try and drop this into that. Let's try, what happens if I throw this effector on it and then put dynamics on it, and you get something really cool. And that workflow is so important. So if you want to live in the world of nodes, you can go into Houdini, and then you're pretty much stuck living in this world of nodes on a pretty fundamental level. But we want to be able to play, but the opportunity to go super deep, if you want to, is where the power of these types of nodes could get unlocked.
Exactly. Yeah, we're super mindful of that, and that's why we keep saying that our goal here is to enable node-based workflows, not enforce them. I internally use the analogy of the Legos. Building a node system is like having the instruction manual for the Legos and building them piece by piece. Whereas a lot of Cinema 4D users love that experimental workflow. They love just taking a bunch of Legos and start putting them together and see what they end up with. And we're super mindful of that, and that's going to be a key part as we build out the next iteration of the object manager.
Yes. I mean, it's really exciting. There's a lot to keep in mind for the way it's implemented right now, and I'm super interested to see where it goes. And it's gonna be a tricky thing to teach people. I don't think people should feel like they have to go and dive into this, even potentially in the farther future. Like I'll say for myself, when I first was opening up the system, right now on your screen, if you search for in the assets for the word grid, it's like, okay, I want to essentially make a cloner grid. And when I search for the word grid, it's like, okay, there's a distribution grid. That sounds like what I want. It's like, oh, that's not what I wanted. It's like, oh, there's a generator grid. That's what I want. It's like, no, that's not what I wanted. Oh, a distribution operation grid. That's actually what I wanted. So there's going to be, I think that's a good example of the things you could trip over right now.
Yeah, totally. There's lots of room for tripping right now, and that really is because we've basically built the foundation of the house and some of the framing, and so obviously the area is under construction. You should wear your hard hat. It doesn't hurt to be qualified to be there, but if you want to be one of the kids playing around after everybody's left the work site for the day, we're fine with that. You won't get, there's not that much of a chance of you getting hurt. But it is definitely an area under construction. If you want to play around, best to focus first on these operators, because like I said, those are the highest level sort of object equivalents in the new system. Certainly like we said, we are looking for feedback on the system. We want to give everybody a chance to start playing with it and to see what's resonating, what's not, both as we look to improve the nodal interface and build out the object system, the object manager type interface to this.
I've actually got something I'm wondering. I don't know if you would have any idea or even what your guess would be, but like what percentage of people, of your average Cinema 4D user, do you think knows how to use Espresso at all beyond the typical set driver, set driven? If they're getting real fancy, they know how to tweak the range mapper inside. Like what percentage of your average user would you say knows how to use Espresso beyond that level?
I couldn't really tell you, and it's sort of a difficult thing to even pull analytics on in the existing Cinema 4D. But I would expect just, I think that it's a reasonable number, but it's not necessarily as high as you would expect from, the forums and, the discussions on your streams and things like that. There is, I think, a silent majority of Cinema 4D users that sort of use the very basic aspects of the application. But yeah, I think it's not a small number, but it's also not the majority either.
Yeah. Well, and then the way what I was saying in my stream is it's like, okay, so what percentage knows how to use it at all beyond set driver, set driven? And then how many people now know how to use the iterator node? And right. It's like, what fraction of Espresso users know how to use this slightly more complicated node? And I'd say you're now cutting your number down to the low single digits, if I'm being generous, would be my guess. I don't know. But yeah. on a pretty fundamental level, like if you're going to dive into these nodes, like the iterator is the least of your worries. Like everything here is an iteration. Everything here is a giant list of points, and you need to know how to extract the information from those points to now create something else. So people shouldn't expect to be like, oh, like this is the way everything's going to be. I had spent a long weekend. I've had so many people tell me that, like, because I'm so technical with things, I love Houdini, and like I would love the technical aspect of it, but I opened up Houdini for a long weekend and I was playing around, and to do anything, you have to create so many nodes, and you have to have something very specific in mind. And with that very specific thing, now you build out mechanically what you want it to do, and now you get exactly that. There's not a lot of room for play. You can't be playful with it and try this, try this, try this. And for somebody who's been building tools now for cinema for almost 20 years, well, no, I've been using cinema for 20 years. I've been building tools for about 10. A lot of the tools that we ended up making back in the day were just tools that made it way faster to do things. And then once you could suddenly do some aspect of something faster, you could suddenly experiment and play. Like transform was always a very simple, it didn't conceptually do anything that you couldn't do by building out the rig, but with that tool built the way it was, there was so much more room for rapid iteration, rapid play. And so no matter how deep this can go, you're always going to want that very high level where you can just throw a dynamics tag on something and get something cool at the end. Like, you've got that stack of cans. Like, I just want to throw something dynamic at it. So the ability to do that we can't do that yet. I know. Actually, this is a question. We ended up doing it sort of accidentally yesterday in the stream, but that does not exist in the object manager. But as an experiment, we exported as a lembic and then opened up the file, and it did exist. Is that, if somebody wanted this geometry, would that essentially be the workflow?
Yeah. We specifically work to make the FBX and Alembic exports support the scene node geometry. So basically the same sort of interface that allows the viewport to display scene nodes in the legacy mode is also pushing it into the external renderers and into FBX and Alembic. Now, if you turn the display into the fast shading, we're actually bypassing that interface and going straight to the new viewport core. So that's why you're able to get higher performance, but not all the features are supported.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know. Where did you pull that setting up from?
I always get to it just by clicking the empty node area and it pops up. There's someplace else that it shows up, but that's how I always get to it.
Okay, so one mode is kind of filtering it through some legacy viewport, and the other is just saying, no, I'm doing my super fast version.
Right.
And then, and Bernd is saying in the chat, which is very important, that it's going to be very easy for people, and I've been doing it already, comparing scene nodes to Espresso, but they are not the same thing at all. I mean, even on a fundamental level, there's lots of cool stuff you could do with Espresso, but Espresso could not in any way generate new objects or really do much to modify them. I guess you could technically move points around, but you couldn't make new points. You couldn't delete points. Already you were doing a bunch of like extrusions and deleting and generating brand new geometry. Like Espresso could never do anything like that. And
right.
But even to make that comparison isn't fair to scene nodes, where it's the foundational structure to make things. And it's going to be the super new modern architecture, not based on any of the older legacy code.
Yeah, and to kind of go back to what you were talking about this not necessarily being for everyone. I mean, it's not. The idea is that the TD level users, the real nerds, can build up assets like that triangle distribution and package them in a way that anybody can use them. And right now, even the packages are only accessible in the node editor, but in future releases, they're going to be much more accessible at a higher level, like an object manager type workflow. So for instance, one of those packages, we've got a basic platonic here. Plug it into the scene so you can see it. And then if we search for Greeble, this is one of the generators that ships with release 23. And you can see that this basically goes in and Greebles. And, you've got control here over the offset and the number of iterations. And if you want to see how this is actually built, you can just go up here to Assets and choose Edit Asset. And you can see how this Greeble effect was actually constructed. We're in setting and then, doing some stuff in this group and then taking the active selection and inverting it and then going into this loop carried value, which is like the iterate node type thing, and doing a bunch of things in here.
I didn't.
So
What's that called again?
Greeble. And
No,
there's
not
actually
the
a
Greeble.
number
The
of these
iterate thing.
assets. Oh, the loop carried value.
Loop.
And there's actually a number of these that we built in. There's the atom array, the brick wall, grass greeble, rain, stairs. I mean, here's a staircase generator. We'll just drop that in. And, you can see here we've got a staircase generator. We can adjust the number of steps. We can adjust the width. We can adjust the tread depth, the height, bevel radius, nosing, the riser height. And again, if we go in and choose edit asset, you can actually deconstruct how this is built. But the key is not necessarily for every user to understand how this is built. The key is for every user to know that they've got an asset they can really easily do stairs, or they've got an asset that they can really easily use to greeble an object. So that's a lot of the idea here.
That's the exciting part. I'm pumped for the future. What is already exposed here is super crazy. I was not expecting to see all of the modeling functionality pop out. I thought it was going to be pretty limited to cloner type functionality.
But the modeling functionality was a surprise. It wasn't something that we thought we were going to be able to squeeze into this release. But again, because the modeling core work had been done, it made it rather, I won't say easy, but rather straightforward to expose all of those modeling features within the scene nodes interface.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not to trivialize because it's going to take a long time to build anything, but after you get an extrude, an inner extrude, a subdivide, a delete, like you don't have to list that many things until it's like, wow, we've got quite the toolkit to make a lot of things. And the complexities of just the way you could extrude something, change the selection, extrude something. Like, as I'm tinkering, I won't be surprised if one of the first things I do is make a pretty simple city generator, just because I can randomly select things and grow different floors and then select the bottom floor and put a door into it. Like, and this is not even the 1.0 version of this. This is the tech demo. So,
yep,
man, does it open up a lot of crazy possibilities.
Yeah, so we're really excited to see what folks do with it. I'm excited to see the stream with you and Casey on Friday.
Yeah, that's gonna be dangerous. I'm not sure if Casey had seen any of this prior to official launch, but I was like, I got to read the descriptions of the scene nodes because I need to know what some of them do. Like you just said, we're talking about I wrote a note, but that iterator, the loop, and it's it's like, oh, that's really important. But the idea of how many things are, I don't know, the tricky thing, and I'm actually curious how. I'm sorry, my brain starts going a million miles an hour as we get into these types of topics. But I'm really interested in how people interface with it because I am uniquely qualified in a lot of ways to hit the ground running with something like the system because I know a pretty good amount of code. I know Espresso really well. So the idea of an array doesn't intimidate me at all. But the idea that if you want to move this object, there is no PSR. You cannot do position. You have to use a matrix operation. Who know, what user? Because Cinema 4D artists are artists. And while 3D is one of the more technical ways you could approach art, the word matrix is going to be nonsense to 99% of people. So that's where things get interesting. It's like, I want to move this. It's like, well, you need a matrix. It's like, what's a matrix? I don't know. So I'm curious where this all settles down.
Yeah, and like I say, again, it's all very low level, one step above the actual programming at this point, because that's kind of where you have to start, right? You don't start building a house by, I guess now sometime with prefabs they do, but you don't start by standing up a whole wall. You start by laying by putting down a slab, and then by a row of bricks, and so it's that's the idea, is that this is very low level at this point. But then you can see something like this greeble asset and how the bricks can line up and actually make a wall,
Yeah,
I'm overkilling on the construction analogies now, and I apologize to you all.
Yeah. Well, I like you keep saying you've laid the foundation, but in my head, it's more like there's a big dirt lot and there's a bag of cement and there's a pile of steel beams and there's a pile of bricks. It's like, all right, like have at it. Let's see what happens.
There was a question about how materials get assigned, and you do that through this material op. And if I go ahead and create a new node, and we can actually just use Redshift here, in fact, and let's just go ahead and make it, well, let's make it red. And we'll jump back into scene nodes. You just drag the material into the material op, and then I guess I'm going to need some sort of a dome light or something here. And we'll go ahead and open the render view. And there you go. So the Redshift team has done a great job of supporting the node-based asset, the node-based objects here for us. One thing that isn't available yet, I don't think, I haven't seen the release version today in Redshift, but is available with standard physical, is you're able to create a node, like we'll grab car paint here. We'll make sure that, we need to make sure that we're in, there we go. And we'll add a material parameterization node. And what we can do with this is we can drag that in and hit update material parameter ports, and it'll pull in all of the sort of exposed parameters from this node into the scene node system. So then we can take something like, let's kill this greeble, and we'll create a distribution op. And just make this a spiral. And let's kill the dome light, because that's killing our... Oh, I think we need to change our render as standard. Okay. So we'll just drag the car paint here into the... Actually, we want to drag it into the material parameterization. We got it. We'll drag the result here into the material. And then we can take the color here and drag that into base color. And now we're able to take the color from the distribution op and feed it into this. Let's make this platonic a little bit smaller. And we'll go ahead and hit render. And you can see that we're getting, and again, we need some sort of lighting. We're getting all of those different colors on that, theoretically. There we go.
Yeah.
So we get all of the different colors from the distribution op fed through the material, and we could use those colors to, we could use the ratio, for instance, to adjust the, I don't know what any of these mean in the car paint, but the roughness maybe. And so now they should get rougher as they go outward. So let's see if we can. We don't have a very good scene set up for this to really be able to see it, but you kind of get the idea here of how you can interface with the material system.
Is that specifically only the regular cinema materials, or would that also work with the node-based Redshift materials?
It works with the node-based standard and physical materials. I don't believe it works with the Redshift materials yet to do the parameterization. But you can apply, Redshift materials to in the material op.
Yeah, it's getting crazy. And we got lots of people showing up in the chat. We've got Casey hanging out in the chat with Burned, and now Smeka showed up, and Chad is here as well. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out, everybody. There's a lot of really cool things in this version of cinema. Do you know what's another thing worth mentioning is there's, like I said, every time a new version comes out, there's always going to be somebody complaining about their pet feature not being there. But this is a half-year version of cinema. Like, we already got another version of cinema this year. So the idea of those two things being combined, being what we got this year, is like, that's a huge amount of new content. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. And again, the thing that we tried to do with this was, we've got a little bit of the future, We've got the UV tools that we brought in that were a big user request. We wrapped those up in 23, and we started the animation theme. We did some UV stuff for sort of the modeler people, and then now we're working on some animation stuff for the animation people. So we're trying to balance the things that we work on and bring out to folks, and so that nobody's left out and everybody gets something new.
There is a lot for everybody in this one, between the UVs, the new character tools, which are extensive, the basic animation tools being improved, and now being able to go so deep here with even this first version of the nodes. It's a really great version. You guys did a great job.
Thank you. It's all credit goes to a great team of developers and designers and QA engineers that really worked incredibly hard on what was a really short cycle in the midst of a lot of craziness going on in the world.
Yeah, that is true.
But I really couldn't be happier with what the team's produced this year.
And now the chat is starting to shout out all the things that they want. So people want cloth, people want particles. I mean, you know me, anything with dynamics is right up my alley.
Yeah, and of course the key here now is to continue to develop features where they make sense in a way that they'll work for both the classic Cinema 4D and the new Cinema 4D as we continue to build out more features in the new Neutron core scene nodes based object system. And, as we build all those new features, we have an opportunity to both take advantage of all of the great things that Nodes is going to offer us, but also to address a lot of those user concerns that we've had throughout the years in those areas. So, being able to look at making unified dynamics down the road in the scene node system, we'll be rebuilding that core. So we have the opportunity to address those things. So it's exciting times ahead. I said internally, there was a discussion and I said, just like the kids in the back seat of the car on the trip, I'm sure everybody's going to be yelling, are we there yet? And how much further throughout the trip. But, we've got, I think an exciting road and some great things to see along the way.
100%. I'm super excited seeing everything come back and combine, because there's so many legacy systems. Things come out slowly. So you have an old cloth system and you have soft bodies, which do some things cloth can't, but cloth can do a couple things that soft bodies can't. But the idea of all new dynamic, at some point it's like a theoretical, new dynamic system. It can be built from scratch to be it should address this and this and this, and they all use the same controls. It'll all be compatible with each other because they're going to be built new moving forward. So That's exciting. I imagine there'll be some growing pains doing the transition between the old systems and the new, but that bridge will be crossed when we get there.
No doubt. And it's easy at this stage because folks pretty much will know when they go into the node-based system, but it will get a little tough here for a few version cycles where you have to think about which system you actually want to build things in. And we're going to try and build as many bridges as we can. But there will be a little bit of growing pains here in the next year or so, probably, as we get through some of the meat of this transition. Brawley's asking how backwards compatible is R23. So as long as you don't get into the scene node system, it's really very backwards compatible. The animation workflow features basically just act on the keyframe data, so you're not going to have any issues there. The base objects and everything will continue to work. You won't be able to make use of the retargeting or the pose library. Well, the pose library actually you could make use of in R23, but you won't be able to obviously open it up in a previous version and use it. But if you created keyframe data with the pose library, obviously that will work in older versions. The character definition, character solver stuff will not work in an older version. So there are some limitations, but we do strive to keep things as backwards compatible as possible.
Well, yeah, obviously if you are in R23 and you make a new remesh generator, that's not going to go back, but the rest of the scene will. So
right.
Let's see. Anybody have any final questions as we wrap up here? There's a lot of really cool stuff, and I've got my big R23 new features video. It's over an hour and a half. It's as short as I could make it and still cover pretty much everything. There's a couple small things I didn't get to. Like, I didn't talk about Python. I just don't think it's applicable to that many people, even though the people it is applicable to, it's really important. I'm going to do a very quick little advertisement here for my brand new plugin, Recall. Recall is enabling me to do these live streams. Thank you so much, Rick, for coming and joining me, because I'm always excited when we have a new version of Cinema to talk about. But these live streams, all the tutorials I make, everything that goes out in the world for free, it's got to be supported somehow. Rocket Lasso does not take on client work. Our job is to make tools for everybody else to try and make your work easier to do. And this is the very first tool from Rocket Lasso. So if you would like to support me and these tutorials and these live streams, the best way to do it is to get a tool that's going to help make your job easier. And here is a little preview of it. Well, it looks like I forgot to click it to automatically rewind when I go to it. So next time it'll play from the beginning. But just a little preview. I've got a bunch of videos out on how to use it. I'm really excited. It can save you so much time, and there's a lot of new opportunities that open up with that workflow, especially with the camera stuff. It's kind of crazy how well it works there. But I just wanted to touch upon that before we wrap up the final questions here. Keep those coming in. Oh, one important thing to mention is if you're supporting on Patreon, there's a bunch of coupons for getting Recall for way cheaper as well. So, and there's links below in the description if you want to check any of that out. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and hanging out. I'm very excited that there'll be another live stream this week with Casey Hupke on Friday. It'll be starting an hour later than this one started on Friday, and we're just going to play with nodes for as long as we want to, really. So that should be exciting. Everybody, let's see, any questions? Somebody's talking about multi-threads, but I'm not sure what that's in regards to. Yeah, excited to see where it goes. Yeah, Python 3 is really cool. I just didn't have much I could demo in it. Yeah, and then, yeah, plans for future things. So nothing that I think we need to address. So that should wrap it up. Yeah, thanks, everybody. Thank you so much, Rick, for joining me. There's a bunch of really cool content.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is great. Rick's always down for answering everybody's questions. And as we were saying, he is now our bridge from the world of artists into the world of the people making Cinema 4D. So that's really fun as well. Maxon's got a bunch of videos out on R23. Check out my video as well. I'll be talking a whole bunch about it, probably making some specific tutorials about my favorite features and how we can go deeper into them instead of just the quick demos. So thank you so much. I'll see everybody on Friday, and that should wrap this one up.
Yeah. And 3D Motion Show, guys. 3dmotionshow.com.
There's another. It's probably still going on right now. So we're stealing people away from Maxon to talk about Maxon stuff. But I think that's fine. All right. See everybody on Friday. Bye bye.
See ya.